This is the first in a two-part series of videos that I'm going to make on claims out there that one can fuel their car on water. Of course, cars are not fueled by water. They will probably never be fueled by water. And it is a false claim when somebody says, I fuel my car with water. Unfortunately, there are hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube making the fraudulent bullshit claim that you too can fuel your vehicle with water if you just buy their device. Their devices generally run anywhere from $300 to $2,000, depending on how much the size of their device and how much water their electrolysis system converts into oxygen and hydrogen. Unfortunately, a hell of a lot of these clowns out there actually do believe that their device is a good thing. I suspect they really do believe that their devices improve miles per gallon for vehicles, gasoline-powered vehicles. They really do believe that the emissions coming out of the vehicles are cleaner. Both of those claims are false. You will note that the typical electrolysis system that these clowns sell, generally about $450, $500 each, produce a tiny trickle of hydrogen and oxygen, and they use a hell of a lot of electricity to do that. And where do they get the electricity? From the alternator being run by the automobile's engine, which is burning gasoline. Good fucking grief. And a lot of these people call that free energy because they do not understand, or they choose not to, how a vehicle alternator works. So I am going to explain how the bloody fuck a vehicle's alternator works. And I have a hell of a lot of work to do, and I don't want to make this video, but the need is so fucking great out there, I'm going to put off repairing the south pasture fence and make this fucking video. I wish bloody fuck I didn't have to, goddamn fuck it. Most vehicles on the road out there, gasoline and diesel powered, generally have an alternator in them. These alternators produce anywhere from about 18 amps to 35 amps. These alternators are run off of a drive belt that is attached to the engine. That drive belt is also generally attached to the cooling fan that is behind a radiator. Located inside the alternator, there is a field winding. This is a lot of wraps of copper wire. When electricity is applied to that field winding, it produces an electromagnetic field. That electromagnetic field is then used from kinetic energy from the automobile's engine to convert that kinetic energy into electricity. Also inside an alternator, or mounted on top, is a voltage regulator. The voltage regulator constantly monitors the voltage in the start battery of the automobile. If the battery's voltage drops around 12.8 or so, the regulator turns the alternator's field on. That, of course, creates a drag on the automobile's engine. When the voltage regulator notes that the battery's charge is back up to about 13.8 volts, it turns the field in the alternator off, and the drag on the engine decreases radically. These alternators, depending on the amperage, consume energy from the engine, and the engine is consuming gasoline. The more current that a alternator is producing, the more gasoline is being burned because the more drag on the engine that the alternator is causing. Point number one is, if your battery in your vehicle does not hold a charge well, you are wasting gasoline because the regulator on the alternator is constantly keeping the alternator's field winding on, which creates an electromagnetic field, and it's creating drag on your engine, and that drag on your engine is wasting gasoline. If you have a bad battery in your vehicle and you find that it's getting harder and harder to start, you will also notice that your miles per gallon has decreased because your alternator is always on. The water being converted into hydrogen and oxygen takes a hell of a lot of electricity. Therefore, your battery, if you install these devices, will probably never get up to a full charge, and your alternator will always be on. One can, of course, put a high amperage alternator in a vehicle to supply that high demand that these electrolysis systems require. That, of course, uses more gasoline because the higher the amperage on the alternator, generally, the more drag it causes on the engine. I think I shall read a description that I found in YouTube on one of these devices. First off, it reads, and I quote, "Gas from water is a reality," unquote. Well, we knew that 200 years ago. One of the reasons why the Hindenburg exploded was because the United States denied the technology to Germany to create helium out of hydrogen. And I quote again, "Why would anyone refuse to make a fuel with electricity their alternator makes?" unquote. Well, the alternator is, of course, making electricity, but the fuel that it makes, that is the hydrogen that it cracks from water, takes a lot more gasoline energy than the hydrogen energy is worth. To continue quoting, "It's free energy just going to waste," unquote. And there is the problem. This idiot who wrote that video description does not understand, or chooses not to understand, that an alternator is not generating electricity that is free, and that electricity is not going to waste. There is a regulator inside or on top of the alternator that turns the alternator on or off. There is no electricity being wasted. There's a little energy being wasted because the alternator is spinning, but the drag is a hell of a lot less when the field inside that alternator is turned off. It is not wasting energy. Using this device is what is wasting energy. And I will continue the quote, since that's only fair. Quote, "Have your car produce a combustible gas to help increase your fuel efficiency, boost your gas mileage," which is the same thing, "reduce emissions," unquote. I will cover those two things, gas mileage and emissions, in my second video. So, bottom line, these devices waste energy. It is inane and asinine to burn gasoline, to create electricity, to create hydrogen and oxygen, and then burn the hydrogen. And even though it is producing, most of these devices produce tiny, insignificant little bursts of hydrogen that are utterly worthless, nugatory. Your engine doesn't even look at them. It is ridiculous. It is a hell of a lot more efficient, energy efficient, miles per gallon efficient, to not use these devices and just burn gasoline.